There is a kind of silence in the embalming room that doesn't exist anywhere else in the world. It's not the absence of sound, it's the presence of something deeper, heavier. The hush feels like a breath held too long, like the air is afraid to move. Fluorescent bulbs hum above my head, one of them flickering in a nervous stutter. The stainless steel table is colder in winter, and yet tonight, even with the heater on low, the air clings to my skin like damp wool. My name is Daniel Mercer. I'm 57 years old, and I've been a mortician for 32 of those years. I don't frighten easily, or at least, I thought I didn't. The dead used to be easier to work with than the living, but something shifted about 6 months ago. I began to feel watched, not during the day, but in that fragile hour between 2 and 3 in the morning, when the world seems to forget it exists. That's when the quiet changed. It started with small things. A scalpel not where I left it, a drawer ever so slightly ajar, the old cooler door making a low groan, like someone breathing through rotten lungs. I dismissed it as fatigue, long hours, aging eyes, but then came the voice, the whisper beneath the table. It was a Tuesday when I first heard it clearly. I remember because the radio in the break room had just played an old Johnny Cash song, the kind my father used to sing after one too many drinks. I came back into the room, and the silence was waiting for me again, thick and sour. I began preparing a body for embalming, a woman in her 40s. Stroke, they said. She looked peaceful. I was halfway through the process when I dropped my clamp. It clattered to the tiled floor and rolled beneath the table. I knelt to retrieve it. That's when I heard it. Daniel. A whisper, dry, close, as if spoken by lips that hadn't moved in years. I froze. My breath hitched, and for a long second, I couldn't move. My name echoed in my head, not as memory, but as a chill in my spine. I told myself it was my imagination, that the silence had gotten to me, that I needed sleep. But I didn't look under the table. I simply stood and backed away. That night, I didn't finish my work. I left the body on the table, covered, and walked out. I told myself I'd return in the morning, when the light would chase away whatever nonsense had rooted itself in my mind. But light didn't change anything. Not really. The next night, I forced myself to return. I stood in the center of the room, telling myself to be logical. It's just the mind playing tricks, feeding off grief and shadows. But the clamp was still under the table, and so was the whisper. This time it didn't say my name. I'm still cold. The voice was different, feminine, barely a breath, but it chilled me more than the freezer ever had. There was no one there. Over the following weeks, I began to hear the whisper more often, always under the table, always when I dropped something, or knelt, or found myself alone for too long. Sometimes it would hum, sometimes it would cry. I started bringing my portable speaker to play soft classical music while I worked. It helped, a little. One night, I decided to face it. I waited until nearly 3 a.m. The embalming room was empty, save for me, and a cadaver recently brought in. I placed my tools gently on the tray. I crouched down, hands shaking, and looked under the table. Nothing. But the whisper was louder. You left me here. I scrambled back and hit my head against the tray stand. My vision blurred. I swore under my breath, tried to breathe. There was no face under that table, no figure, but I could feel it. Sorrow, anger, abandonment. It wasn't about the body on the table. It never was. That's when I began going through the logs. 30 years of names, dates, causes of death. I looked for anything that matched, any connection, and I found it. A Jane Doe, 1998. Found frozen in an alleyway during the winter. No family, no friends. She had been processed here, in this room, by me. I had left her on the table overnight, because I was called away. I never finished her paperwork. I never gave her a name. The next night, I whispered into the silence, "I'm sorry." The hum stopped. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. No whispers, no misplaced tools, just the steady rhythm of my work. I thought maybe it had passed, that apology had released something, or maybe I'd imagined it all, and the mind had healed itself. But then I dreamt of her. In the dream, I was beneath the table, cramped cold, breath fogging the steel. I could hear her humming. Then her face appeared, eyes hollow, mouth stitched, frost on her cheeks. You remember now. I woke screaming. I don't scream now. I keep her file in my desk. I gave her a name, Elizabeth. I light a candle before each shift, not because I think it'll stop anything, but because it's what we do for the living, and maybe it's what we owe the dead. The embalming room still hums. The silence still sits heavy, but the whispers have changed. They're not angry anymore. They're just waiting. My name is Sister Marianne Holt, and I was once a hospice nurse, stationed at a long-forgotten Catholic care facility, nestled in the rolling hills of Vermont. It wasn't a hospital. Not really. More like a quiet waiting room for the dying, where the crucifix watched silently from every room, and incense hid the scent of loss. St. Bellamy's was the kind of place time forgot. The wallpaper had faded into sepia tones, the floors groaned under every step, and the chapel, the chapel, stood like a relic of a different world. No one really used it anymore. Most of the priests had passed on, and the new generation favored sterile rooms and soft therapy music over Latin masses and shadowed candlelight. But the chapel remained, unchanged. At its heart stood a great stained glass window. The image was beautiful and grotesque, an angel with wings that curled into flames, holding a golden sword over a kneeling man with no face. The plaque beneath it read, Judicium Ultimum, Final Judgment. It had always made me uneasy. The story begins one December evening during my night shift. Snow fell in slow curtains outside the windows, and the halls were unusually still. I was checking on one of our patients, Mr. Elias Granger, an old carpenter with end-stage COPD. He was one of the quiet ones, never complained, barely spoke. That night, I found him sitting upright in bed, eyes fixed on something beyond the window. "They're watching from the chapel," he said, his voice raspy. I turned to look, expecting perhaps a reflection or a light left on, but there was nothing, just the snow and the distant shape of the chapel, its spire barely visible through the darkness. "Who's watching, Elias?" I asked gently. He didn't respond, just turned his head slowly, stared at me, and whispered, "They want the window open." I brushed it off. Morphine dreams perhaps, but something in the way he said it gave me pause. That same night, the fire alarm went off, but only in the chapel wing. No smoke, no heat, just a shrill, soul-piercing sound that stopped the second I opened the chapel door. Inside, the air was cold, too cold. My breath clouded in front of me, like I'd stepped into a freezer. Then the window, the stained glass angel had changed. Not dramatically, just slightly. The golden sword had a crack in it, a long jagged line that hadn't been there before. I had convinced myself it was the cold, that perhaps the ancient glass had simply given way to years of temperature shifts. But I still told our maintenance man Paul to take a look. He didn't find any structural damage, just an old window, perfectly intact, no crack, no flaw. I returned the next night, and the crack was back. Taste time. Elias was sitting up again, eyes glassy with fever. "It's starting," he said. Once the sword breaks, the angel steps down, and it doesn't stop until it's judged us all. You're safe here, Elias, I said, placing a damp cloth on his forehead, but he only smiled, a twisted, broken thing. No one's safe once the chapel breathes. I tried not to let it get to me, but then things started to change. Birds began flying into the chapel's stained glass, 3 in 1 week, dead on impact. I heard footsteps in the pew aisles when the building was locked. Candles relit themselves. A rosary snapped in my hand while I was praying. And then the dreams began. Not mine. Elias's. He screamed in his sleep every night, muttering in Latin, a language he never knew. I wrote the phrases down, one by one, and had Father Delaney translate them. They were phrases from Revelations, warnings, oaths. He who stands at the window shall not enter in peace. The angel has turned its face away. The faceless man walks. Each night, I found a new crack in the stained glass. The sword broke in half. The angel's wings curled tighter, almost like they were closing in. And slowly, impossibly, the faceless man behind the angel began to lift his head. I stopped going into the chapel alone. I started avoiding it altogether, but the patients didn't. They began to die in odd positions, sitting up, reaching toward windows, eyes open. Some died murmuring about light. Others begged me not to let the chapel's window open. One even scratched the word judgment into his bed frame with shaking hands. One night, Elias vanished. We searched every room, every hallway, and found him standing in front of the chapel doors in his hospital gown, barefoot, snow-crusted to his feet. He was staring up at the window. I rushed to him, pulling a blanket around his shoulders. He turned and looked at me, eyes full of tears. "I think he's coming," he said. "The man without the face. He died that night, peacefully," they said. That I saw the chapel the next morning. The stained glass angel was gone. Just gone. The entire pane was empty, the figure erased. Only the kneeling man remained, his head now fully raised, revealing a featureless void where his face should have been. No one believed me. Maintenance claimed the window looked fine. Photos showed the angel intact. Only in person, only in those quiet hours of dusk, could I see the change. I began to document everything, times, temperatures, positions of the cracks, but the more I recorded, the worse it got. My rosary turned to ash on my nightstand. My prayers came out garbled. I'd wake with my hands pressed flat against my window, though I never remembered rising from bed. And the faceless man in the chapel window, he began to raise his hand. I left St. Bellamy's 6 months later. I told them I needed a sabbatical, but I knew I wasn't coming back. Before I left, I visited the chapel one last time. I stood beneath the stained glass window, trying to see the angel again, praying it would return, but there was only the man now. His hand was pressed to the glass, right where mine was. They always said room C was colder than the rest. I thought it was just the vents, the hum of refrigeration units, masks everything. There's no time in there, no sound except your own breath, slowed and muffled by the chill. Light flickers overhead like a dying pulse, and every time I pull that heavy steel door closed behind me, I feel like I'm sealing something in or out. I never quite know which. My name is Vincent. I'm 51, a mortuary technician with 22 years under my belt, and I've always prided myself on being practical. I keep to myself, keep things clean, and keep the dead comfortable. That's my job. But something about cold room C, it makes me forget what comfort even feels like. The cold doesn't bother me, it's what I've chosen. Death isn't warm. People think working around corpses is the hard part. It's not. It's the silence, the weight of silence that has mass, shape, and memory. You carry it with you, even after you clock out. Room C was always avoided by the younger staff. The ones who worked the night shift would take extra time filing forms just to delay going back there. I'd chuckle at their nerves until I started getting assigned to it regularly. That's when I noticed it too. The cold wasn't just temperature, it was inside the walls. The first time I truly felt it, it was late. A Tuesday, I think. I'd gone in to catalog a Jane Doe. The light buzzed overhead, blinking once, then again. I closed the door behind me like always, and pulled open drawer C4, and there she was, young, pale, nameless. I logged the time, her identifiers, but something about her eyes, even shut, gave me pause. Not in a supernatural way, in a human way. She looked alert, like she'd just flinched. I turned away for a second to double-check the tag, and I swear I heard the faintest whisper of breath. It was absurd, of course. Bodies don't breathe, but I froze, holding my own lungs captive, waiting. Nothing, just the mechanical drone of the room. Over the next few weeks, Room C changed, not physically. No one else complained, but to me, the cold was deeper. It bit at my bones before I even entered. I began to dream about it. I'd wake up chilled, convinced I'd left the drawer open, and then came the mix-ups. Twice, I found drawers open that I'd closed myself. Once, the same Jane Doe from drawer C4 was found tagged for transport, even though she hadn't been cleared. The paperwork was correct, signed by someone who didn't exist in our system. It made no sense. I brought it up casually during shift change, joking about Room C being haunted. My colleague Dennis didn't laugh. He looked at me and said, "I thought it was just me. That's all, nothing more." He never stepped foot in Room C again. After that week, there was one night, the night everything truly shifted, when I was doing inventory past midnight. The whole outside Room C was quiet, too quiet, not in the comforting way, but in the kind that makes your spine itch. I entered, holding the clipboard, and the door creaked closed behind me, with its usual finality. I logged 1 body, 2, then 3, the 4th, drawer C4, resisted. I tugged, harder. It screeched open slowly. Empty, empty. That wasn't possible. Jane Doe had not been claimed. I had seen her just that morning during the inspection round. My heart pounded in the stillness. I checked the clipboard again. Her name, well, her identifier, was there, but her drawer was not. A sharp snap of light above me made me flinch. The bulb popped, plunging the room into half-darkness, and then I felt it. Breath. Not mine. Warm breath on my neck. In that freezing room, I turned fast, flashlight raised. No one, just a drawer, now halfway open. Drawer C5, not the one I opened, but it was moving, slightly. I don't remember dropping the flashlight, but I must have, because when I reached for it, my fingers brushed against cold metal, and something else, something soft, fabric. I turned the beam up, and there, lying on the ground, was a body bag, unzipped, empty. The room was too cold for hallucinations, but I could hear something now, soft dragging, a gentle shuffle, and the unmistakable click of another drawer opening. I ran. I won't lie. I ran so fast I nearly dislocated my shoulder on the door. When I returned, with 2 attendants and a supervisor, Room C was pristine. No open drawers, no fallen flashlight. Jane Doe was exactly where she should be. I was told I needed rest, that I was overworked. Maybe I was, but that night changed me. Since then, I've refused to enter Room C alone. I make sure someone else is always on the floor, but sometimes, I hear things, whispers in vents, the soft clink of metal. Once someone left the clipboard outside the room, with a message written on it. She's not done. No one admitted to it. No one even acknowledged it happened. I think about that girl, the Jane Doe, young, unknown, abandoned even in death, cold, alone. Maybe it was never about haunting. Maybe it was about being noticed, about not being forgotten. in a place designed to erase the last traces of who you were. Every profession has its ghosts. Ours don't walk the halls. They stay in drawers, watching, waiting for someone to remember. I still clock in, still prepare the bodies, still nod politely when people joke about working with the dead, but I don't laugh anymore, because cold room C is never truly empty. There's a humming sound in the cold corridors of the basement. Not mechanical, not electrical, more like a breath, steady and low, like someone trying not to be noticed. That hum lingers around storage B, a room we all pretend we've never opened, but the truth is, we've all been inside at least once. The halls smell like bleach and something else, something older. The concrete sweats in the summer, and in winter, it cracks like a bad memory. And down here, beneath the crematorium and offices, everything feels like it's waiting, like the building is holding its breath. My name is Jerome. I'm 59, been a mortuary technician for almost half my life. I used to think I had seen it all: grief, rage, stillbirths, suicides. But it's not the bodies that get to you, it's the things they leave behind, the echoes. I used to be confident. Now I avoid looking into dark corners. The first time I opened storage B, it was just for old casket lining. We'd run out upstairs, and the delivery was late. My boss told me, check the B unit in the basement. Stuff might still be usable. That door hadn't been touched in years. I remember the way the key hesitated in the lock, like even the metal didn't want to be part of it. Inside, it was colder than it should have been. No ventilation, just concrete and metal shelves sagging under boxes. Some were labeled with old masking tape, 2003, unclaimed, MISC. One was just marked with an X in red. No date, no name. I didn't open it. I found the lining I needed, stuffed at the back, behind a broken child-size gurney. I was about to leave when I heard something. Not a voice, more like a shuffle, a soft drag against the floor. I turned. Nothing. Just the boxes, but the air had changed. Thick, dense like fog in your lungs. I got out quick and didn't mention it. Told myself it was just nerves or bad lighting. That should have been the end of it. A few weeks later, a body came in. Woman, in her 70s. No known family, no ID, just a paper tag on her wrist from the hospital that said unknown female 27. Odd, because she was clearly decades past 27. Maybe a clerical error, we figured. She didn't have that sickly smell some corpses get. She smelled sweet, almost floral, but artificial, like funeral home air freshener, trying to cover something rotten, and her eyes wouldn't stay shut. I closed them twice, before covering her face. That night, I dreamt of storage B, only in the dream. It was wider, longer, impossibly large, like a cathedral built underground. In the dream, I was walking toward the red X box, and someone or something was breathing behind me. I woke up cold, like I'd never left the room. A week passed. The woman was cremated. No one claimed her remains. One night, after an unusually late intake, I had to go downstairs again. The main lift was down, so I had to walk the corridor past storage B. I wasn't even going in, just passing by, but the door was open, just slightly, maybe an inch, enough for a sliver of light to fall into the hall. Though there were no lights wired into that room, I froze, told myself someone else must have left it open, a cleaner, maybe, but the air was wrong. That thick fog feeling again. I could taste it in the back of my throat. Wet copper and lilies. I couldn't walk past, couldn't turn my back on it. Inside, the red Xbox was gone. In its place was the woman's body, lying flat on the metal shelf. Eyes open, same tag, unknown female 27, but we cremated her. I backed out, shut the door, locked it, double-checked the bolt. I didn't tell anyone, not because I was scared they wouldn't believe me. I was scared they might. Over the next month, I started noticing changes, inventory mismatches. Boxes that should have been sealed were opened, unclaimed ashes stored neatly in urns that weren't ordered. I'd get calls asking if we'd received another unknown female 27. Each time, I'd say no, but each time, I'd wonder. I started sleeping with the TV on. Something about silence made my ears ring, like there was a message trying to get through. One night, I stayed late to catch up on paperwork. Around midnight, the intercom in the office clicked on. I hadn't touched it. There was only one word, spoken in a whisper I didn't recognize. Downstairs. I almost didn't go. I almost walked out and never came back. But something in me, stupid curiosity or pride, wanted to see. Storage B was locked, but the key was already in the door. Inside, everything was back to normal. Boxes in place, no bodies, no scent, except one thing. The red Xbox was on the floor, open. Inside was a mirror, small, cracked, framed in rusted brass. The glass was foggy, like someone had breathed on it. When I looked in, I didn't see myself. I saw the woman, only she wasn't dead. She was standing in the corridor behind me, eyes wide, lips moving. I turned. No one. But when I looked back, the mirror was gone. I left the room, didn't bother locking it. Since then, I've had moments waking up in places I don't remember walking to. Always cold places, laundry room, morgue cooler, even once the cremation chamber, thankfully powered off. Every now and then, I smell the flowers, artificial, cloying. There's no record of an unknown female 27, before or after that intake. The cremation log has her name, but the tape is smudged, illegible, and the ashes, they're gone. Sometimes I think I was supposed to take her place, that by opening storage B, I invited something old and patient into myself. I still work here. I don't know why. Maybe because I'm waiting for her to return and finish what she started. Or maybe I already did, and this is just the echo. The walls of the viewing room are always too quiet, even when families cry or priests whisper final prayers. There's a kind of silence that creeps in underneath it all. It's the silence of the dead, I think. Not just the absence of life, but a kind of presence in the absence, like they're still here, watching from just beyond the last breath. I've worked at Evercrest Mortuary for 19 years. My name is Lana, and I'm 42. I do cosmetics, presentation, and viewing room preparation. I clean faces, style hair, smooth cold hands. It's a strange job to love, but I do, or I did, until last winter. I'd been working on a young man, 27, overdose, found alone in a motel. Nobody claimed him for almost a week. When they did, it was a woman who said she was his sister, pale, composed, eyes like chipped stone. She didn't ask for much, just a private viewing. 1 hour, no service, no friends, just her. The night of the viewing, it was snowing, thick, slow flakes that made the parking lot feel like a memory. I set up the room, flowers, soft light, music low. The body looked peaceful. I remember thinking he almost looked like he was listening. The sister arrived 5 minutes early. She wore a dark blue coat with velvet cuffs and smelled like old wood. She didn't speak as I led her in, just nodded. I stepped out, gave her the privacy she'd asked for, but I watched from the office monitor, not out of suspicion, just habit. We're told to observe in case someone faints, or breaks down, or needs support. Most people cry, or kneel, or whisper apologies. She didn't cry, she just stared. 10 minutes passed, then 20. She never moved. I began to feel uneasy, like I was watching something I shouldn't. Her head tilted, slightly, like she was listening to something only she could hear. Then she smiled. Not grief, not fondness. It was the kind of smile you see in people who win arguments no one else hears. Cold and quiet. I reached for the intercom button to check on her, but just then, she stood. She leaned down close to the young man's face. Her lips moved, but there was no sound. Then she placed something in his breast pocket. I zoomed in with the camera, but couldn't make it out. A small slip of paper, a coin, a key. She left without a word. Didn't sign out. I found her coat hanger, still swinging. I went into the viewing room, immediately. The air had shifted, like the warmth had been pulled out. I approached the casket, heart thudding, unsure why. In the breast pocket was a photograph, black and white, faded. It showed a building I didn't recognize, maybe an old boarding house or hospital. Standing in front of it were 3 people, 2 women, 1 man. All of them looked straight at the camera, except the man. He was looking to the side, at something just out of frame. I flipped the photo over. A single sentence was scrawled on the back. He saw it too. That night, I dreamt of the viewing room, only it wasn't snowing outside. It was raining, and the windows were covered in condensation. Someone stood at the far end of the room. Not the sister, not the man. Someone else, watching the body, in the casket. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure turned to look at me, but had no face, just an expanse of skin, blank and smooth. I woke with a scream, caught in my throat. The next day, I checked the body again. His expression had changed. The muscles shouldn't have allowed for it, but his brow seemed furrowed, and his lips slightly parted, like he'd died mid-sentence. I asked the director if we had the sister's contact information. He frowned, said the man had been listed as unclaimed, and that no one had come forward. The logbook showed no entries for visitors that night, but the photo was real. I kept it in my desk drawer. For days, I'd glance at it, wondering which part was meant to scare me. The building, the people, or whatever the man had been looking at. One evening, I stayed late, going through archived records. I found a funeral program from 1963, with the same building on the cover, an old psychiatric facility, closed down after a fire. I stared at the grainy image for a long time before realizing it was the same photo, but the man was missing from this version. Only the 2 women remained. I don't know why I did what I did next. Curiosity, madness. I placed the original photo back into the casket with the man's body just before cremation. A final glance. Since then, I've seen them in reflections, in corners, in that moment between turning off the lights and total darkness. A man, mouth open, a woman with eyes like stone, and behind them, always behind them, the faceless one. I still work at Evercrest. I still do the hair and the hands, but I don't stay after dark, and I never ever look in the breast pockets.